Now, if any of you haven't read this book, one of my favorite books ever about technology, Where Good Ideas Come From by Steven Johnson, who's a guy based here in New York. And Steven, he started with this, and he's a friend of mine, by the way, too, and he started the work on this book just with the idea that if you go back in time, back 100 years, 150 years, before there was a lot of communication around the world, great inventions tended to pop up in different parts of the world where nobody could have possibly known what everybody else was doing. The car was being developed in the US and Europe at the same time. The flight was being developed in the US and Europe at the same time by people who had no idea what the others were doing. Why is that possible? Why did those things pop up at the same time? And he started doing research, and he landed on this idea of the adjacent possible, which looks like this. So if you imagine, this is, on this axis over here is what technology can do. And so, down here is stuff that's proven, the television and radio, or those, obviously those things down here. And somewhere up here is stuff that we think technology can do someday. It's, it's pie in the sky stuff. It's, it's holograms and crazy blockchain ideas, or somewhere just a little beyond what technology can do. And along this axis down here is what society adopts and can accept. So, in this part here are things that we readily use in our lives. We got email, we watch TV, all those things. And out here are things that we're not ready for. You can introduce that product, but we're not quite ready for it. And imagine way out here somewhere is like basically science fiction. It's teleportation, sits out there. So Steven Johnson's point about the adjacent possible is that all of the great world-changing inventions tend to come in this thin line, just outside of what's already, what technology can provably do and what society provably wants to adopt, but not so far out that we don't quite get it yet, or not so far out that the technology is still sketchy. And what happens in this thin band right here is it's usually a combination of a bunch of things that exist already. So it's not, and the minivan is a perfect example of that, right? It wasn't like this radical, like new bubbly invention of a car or a flying car or anything like that would sit way out here somewhere. But it wasn't just, let's take a Volkswagen van and put nicer seats in it. It was something that took a bunch of pieces that were already here and were already in here and just took it outside this line a little bit so that it seemed new and it seemed to solve a problem that didn't exist before, and it seemed to push the technology or the capabilities just a little bit, but not so far out that it seemed crazy. And that's important because, I've seen, through my career, I've seen like probably 1,000 startups. I've sat with them, and I would say half of them are creating something that sits out here somewhere. That you go, and actually one of my co-authors for the book was Al Ramadan, and I first met Al in the 1990s because he started a company called Quokka Sports, and Quokka Sports had this idea of basically putting sports online and creating a new experience by adding a lot of data to what was flowing in, and being able to watch it on the web. Everything about what Quokka Sports was doing was right. 10 years too soon, because we didn't have, we still had dial-up modems. There was just, and the way that people thought wasn't quite there yet. Like I want to watch this stuff on my laptop, and so Quokka was a breakthrough company. Like NBC and other companies signed contracts with them. They thought it was really cool. But as soon as the tech crash started to happen in the early 2000s, it went out of business because it didn't have the kind of adoption here, and the technology couldn't quite do it yet. And so we see that all of the time. It just sat too far out here somewhere. So the great new categories are, in fact, just a little bit outside of what already exists.